I recently received a comment on one of my videos from a person calling themselves Borderlands. The video dealt with the topic of doppelgangers, and this person wanted to share their own doppelganger story. I will read it verbatim as I do not feel it appropriate to edit their comment. In the early 90s, my girlfriend, now my wife, and I did a week-long cycle tour with a group. As the group had different abilities, we had a series of refreshment stops arranged, and people came and went as they pleased. Sometimes a bunch arrived at a cafe, other times there were just one or two when we arrived. A lady serving at one place warmly greeted my girlfriend and said, "Oh, you're back." But we didn't give it much thought and continued the ride. At the next stop, a guy said, "Good to see you again," although both of us were sure we'd never met. When this happened a third time, my girlfriend insisted to the woman that she had never been there before, and it was many miles from where we lived. As a young woman, my wife was particularly striking, still is, but we got older, and there was no one in the group who resembled her or had the same cycling outfit. The woman insisted she served her tea and cake only a half an hour before, and they chatted, and clearly thought she was playing some kind of joke. Interestingly, none of the people mentioned her being with me. Who this mystery cyclist with the same appearance and speech, riding to the same rest stops just ahead of us was, we never discovered. We asked around the group at evening social gatherings, but no one had ridden with such a person or seen them at cafe stops. I've always been intrigued by these types of stories, as I have had an incident which I mentioned in a previous video where I was certain that I had passed the same person twice in the span of a few seconds. To this day I cannot explain what I saw. The doppelganger phenomenon is often explained as a type of glitch in the matrix, or a time slip, or possibly a ghost manifesting itself as a mirror image of a living person. The strangest doppelganger stories to me are typically the ones in which people claim to encounter themselves. In a 2015 video, a YouTuber named Cass spoke of the time he encountered himself. When I was a kid, like I was 8 or 9 or something like that, I was playing in the huge parking lot that was behind my house. I was LARPing before I even knew it was called LARP. I had a baseball bat and I was pretending it was a sword. So I was in the parking lot, slashing around, pretending I was fighting bad guys. The parking lot was one huge lot, and then it had driveways going beside the building out to the main road. So I was fighting in it, and I got up to the fence that was on the side of one of the driveways, and I did a fancy little slash, and then I pretended I sheathed it on my back, and then I stood up, and I looked down the driveway, and I saw myself standing on the sidewalk staring back at me. Of course, I was a little bit freaked out because I didn't know what was going on. At first I thought it was someone who looked just like me, and he probably thought the same thing. And then he kind of did a jog down the sidewalk past the building where I couldn't see him anymore. So I ran up and looked around the corner, and he was gone. I looked around the parking lot just in case he was looking for me, but I couldn't see him. So, creeped out, I decided to head home, and I told my father about this, and then he told me about doppelgangers. I was convinced I saw my own doppelganger. Interestingly, Cass's bizarre encounter would come full circle. 2 or 3 years later, I'm walking down the sidewalk, walking home, and I look down the driveway and I see myself playing in this parking lot doing all the same slashes. I did like the fancy slash and sheathed it. And I was like, I remember this. I remember seeing myself in this position. So, without even thinking about it, I dashed off to the front of the building, and I turned around and I waited for my younger self to come up the driveway, but my younger self never showed up. So I looked down the driveway, and I was not there. So I walked home and I told my father about what I just saw, and he laughed. While some people might believe this story is fiction, it's interesting to note that similar accounts of people encountering themselves can be found in paranormal literature. There are also accounts in which people claim that they call themselves in the future. A woman named Tamara, living in Florida, claims that just such a thing happened to her. In April of this year, 2016, I had an emergency and I called my sister to take me to the ER. It took me about 6 times to get through to her. I would call her. She would pick up and say, "Hello, hello." Or she would get a few more words out and I would start talking and her phone would go to voicemail. I would hang up and call her back. This happened every time. She doesn't have a personal voicemail, so I know it wasn't a voicemail to begin with. The 6th time I was starting to lose it. I was not only upset with the medical emergency, but I couldn't get help. Finally I got through to the ER. Everything was fine. It took me about 2 weeks to get better. During the 2nd week of recovering from my illness, I was at work. My cell phone was in my desk drawer, and it rang. I looked at the number and thought it looked familiar. I looked again, and I realized that's my cell phone number. I answered, and I heard a voice. It was my voice saying, "I've been trying to reach you. I need you." It was what I was telling my sister when I needed to get to the ER. It was my voice, my words, but there was just something that made it sound creepy. I can't adequately describe it, but the words were cruel, more than just sounding upset or me crying. Not all doppelganger stories are creepy. Sometimes they are heartwarming. In early 2016, a Massachusetts woman named Leah had her own experience with a doppelganger. The event centered around her dying mother and a seemingly projected version of herself. My mother saw my doppelganger several times before passing away. She passed away 7 months ago today. This has been a difficult year. The fact that I'm sharing this is nutty, but what's the harm? If anything, it feels good to share and remember. My mother and I had a difficult relationship. We loved each other very much, but she drank until it caused her enough problems to pass away. I didn't see her for a year before she passed away. I missed and miss her now terribly. She always had something dark around her, always. When they say addiction is a demon, I've experienced it from both ends, and it is something otherworldly. I guess they call them spirits for a reason. Anyway, when she was in the hospital, she was telling my aunt that she was seeing me, that I was beautiful again, and that I owned a tea shop. That must have been what it sounded like to her. My aunt chalked this up to being ill and still recuperating in the hospital from surgery, but it was repetitive. She was telling her I was coming by frequently, like 4 visits in total, my aunt said. I wasn't aware until coming across a similar story that a doppelganger is associated with death. Meanwhile, the real me had recently lost 40 pounds, straightened my life out, and started working at a diner with a big teacup sign on the front of the building. When my aunt told me the story, unfortunately, my mom was already unconscious and never woke up. I guess my doppelganger did one thing right. She gave my mom peace of mind before passing away. She let her know I was okay, and my aunt said she seemed happy. God, as messed up as people can be, I loved and love my mom so much. I wish I could tell you that I did see her and had peace myself. This is so much more than a ghost story. It's so difficult to write. My doppelganger comforted my mom, whatever she was. I feel like she helped her and me. Not seeing my mom is one of the biggest regrets of my life, and maybe this is a way of coping with the guilt. I guess I'll never know.